everyone just keep it locked in. We're going to invite our next panel, our next group to come up. We're going to be, this panel is about forging your own career in games. And people our guests are going to talk about, there's a lot of ways to get into the gaming industry. However, all right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to walk backwards. We're going to turn this around, and we're going to start up with this panel. Planning for the win, from the drawing board to launch. So let's just get this going. Are y'all ready to keep this panel going? There we go. Fantastic. May I have our guests come up, and as they come up, you know the house rules, loud round of applause for them.
Avengers have assembled. We're all here?
Yes.
All right, let's kick this party started. I am Sherri L. Smith. I am assistant managing editor at Tom's Guy and Laptop Magazine, and this is Planning for the Win. I'm going to let my esteemed panelists go down the line and introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about breaking into games, going from the drawing board to launch. So.
Hi, my name is Geneva Hayward. I'm a student at NYU, and I'm also creating a game called Skate and Date.
Hi. Oh, is this on? Cool. Hi, my name is Ava Kreikel. I am the founder and CEO of Glitch. Glitch is an independent video game label home to bold new voices and big ideas. Early on in my career, I started primarily, I think I'm in 10 years now. I'm 10 years into the industry or so. I started early on doing systems design, some publishing, and then also worked a little bit in business development for companies like Activision Blizzard Media Networks and also Riot Games. Nowadays, a lot of my focus has been on really the fact that 0.01% of C-suite executives, CEOs, and founders really look like, especially in games, really look nothing at all like the people who are in this room. So I'm really working hard to try to change that.
Hi, my name's Kevin Zhang. I'm a co-founder at Serenity Forge, a Boulder, Colorado-based indie game dev studio that seeks to create meaningful games that challenge the way you think.
I'm Brandon Dixon. I'm the author and creator of It's Swords Fall with an extra S in there, multiple swords falling. And I think I'm the only person who does like tabletop RPGs up here, if anybody's into that. So yeah, a few of you. So basically I decided that I wanted to see more people of color in tabletop gaming, and I had an idea for what if we did fantasy that was not Eurocentric? What if it was Afrocentric? Every single bit of it from African lore. Kickstarted it, $120,000 later, and I'm here. So that's me.
All right, so icebreaker question. What game inspired you to decide that you wanted to make games?
Ooh, that is a very hard one, but I can just say like my favorite game is Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, and like just every time I go back to that game, I think, man, I want to make an RPG someday.
Mine's weird and obscure. I was really shy and quiet as a preschooler because my parents are immigrants, and they put me in preschool a little early because they were scared that I wouldn't be able to speak English very quickly or pick it up. So I always sat at this Mac computer in our classroom, and it was there was a game called Richard Scarry, and I don't even remember which title it was, but I remember just being like, this is amazing, and that's why I kept doing, like, I just kept playing that all the time, and it's still, like, is the #1 thing that is so like it's so clear to me that just having that early on so young was so impactful for me, just to like play something, and it was kind of a way to learn a little bit about English, and anyways, yeah.
So there were two games that made me realize I wanted to get into the game dev industry. The first game was the original God of War, which I played when I was in middle school, I think, somewhere around then. And it came with a second disc that had a lot of behind-the-scenes features. And that's the first time that it occurred to me that actual human beings made video games, and they didn't just magically like appear out of nowhere. I was like, I want to be like one of those magic human beings who can like actually make games for a living. The second game was also a Sony Santa Monica game technically, and it was Journey, and that game had a much larger emotional impact on me because I played it when it first came out, and I was going through some tough times in my personal life, and playing it really, really helped me kind of change how I viewed my outlook in my future. And it made me realize that if a game like that can have that kind of impact for me, then there must be more that I can do personally to create those types of impact, hopefully, for other people in the future.
I have two games myself because Swords Fall originally started off as a video game that went nowhere, and then I decided to repurpose it. So for like tabletop, my first one that like really left an impression on me was Vampire the Masquerade, and that was just mainly because it was before like vampires were cool. So I was like, here's some vampires, but they're like, here's real gritty, real world. You could see this in real life, and it was fun, and the game had so much lore, and I found myself reading it like a book. And it's when I started writing, I realized I wanted a game that you don't just play, but like you live. You think, I would like to go there. I want to live there. Like, what do the people eat? Like, I wanted that sort of experience. And on the video game side, and this is something that I take into like how I make my game, is I'm a big MMO guy, and I cut my teeth on a game called Ragnarok Online, if anybody remembers that. Yeah. So a game was just, like when you look back at it now, there's not much to it. You just spent your time killing cute, adorable things, and it was just the kind of game you just played and had fun, had a lot of classes. It got me into the whole, there was more than just the warrior, the rogue, the mage. It had just weird, crazy classes you never heard of before. So it got me thinking in terms of what different things you can do with standard operating procedures,
So Kevin, talk to me about going from a video game to a tabletop. Like you said, the video game didn't go anywhere. So how did we get to the tabletop?
So for me, it was more of because with the game, my job was to write. I was the writer. So I'm just the kind of person, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it all the way. So I sat down, I had like a whole 50-page doc of all sorts of ridiculous stuff, and then it went nowhere. And over time, because I was a tabletop guy, like one thing that happens a lot when you play tabletop is sometimes you don't have inspiration for what your character is, So I would pull stuff from this story, and I'd turn into a tabletop character, and I had this whole campaign, and all the crazy stuff they did, I took back and put it back into the world. So my world is in a weird way like this weird 10-year collection of random RPG moments, but with characters that I already had some sort of sense in, and then I kind of built it. And then basically last year I was super bored. Super bored, didn't like my job, didn't like where things were going in my life, and I was like, I need something to get me going. And there's just something about sitting around a table with friends and you're doing make-believe stuff. It's the same thing you do in video games, just in tabletop there's an element of your mind, your thoughts, whatever. And I wanted to do something like that, and I looked at, it wasn't called Swordsfall, it was originally called Ethereal, and I looked at it, and I was like, I think this is it. I think this is time, and I'll just do something with it. I'll do story-wise, and honestly, I didn't think anybody was going to be interested in a tabletop game for it. I thought people were going to be like, well, we're good with the regulars, D&D, and all that kind of stuff. So I was real nervous about it, and I don't know, it just ended up working well because you realize that it's the idea that matters. And the same thing in video games. And when you have an idea that someone goes, well, that's interesting, I haven't heard it before, it kind of doesn't matter what it's attached to, they'll at least check it out. So, it was like a natural progression in a way.
That's really cool. There are hundreds, thousands of games released every year, and some of them go on to be big box office hits. Some of them just go nowhere. So for the creators, how do you make your game stand out? And as publishers, how do you help creators get that word out there to make us notice? Because I'm media, so I get hit with hundreds of pitches every day. Like, what do you do to get my attention?
Well, I guess when I was first thinking about how to make Skate and Day, it was for a game jam, like specifically for Yuri Jam, and I was like, what? Like, I love rhythm games. I want to make a rhythm game. What isn't usually in rhythm games? So I feel like a lot of rhythm games, like, they give players things to do, or sometimes they'll let players like do whatever they want, but they won't like have it be like. They won't have rhythm games usually don't have like a story that intertwines with the gameplay where it's like, oh, I did this in the gameplay and now it's gonna affect the story. So that's what I was like trying to think about. But I eventually thought, oh, what if I made this like roller skating and rhythm games and then added dating sim elements into it? So by putting,
I'm with it.
so by putting like putting all these things together that I haven't seen already, I was like, oh, maybe this will, like, some people will like it, and people seem to like it so far. So yeah.
DDR into a relationship, basically. DDR into a relationship.
Kind of. It's not multiplayer, but
Could be.
yeah.
Should be.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is what I tell everybody who because people ask me that question a lot, and I tell them sheer persistence. Everything that I got from Swordfall wasn't because it was, there was no one particular element. Like, some of the art pieces that people liked the most got ignored the first time I posted them. They got ignored the second time. So a third, fourth, fifth, like, if you were to go through, my Twitter's like my main thing I use. If you look through my Twitter, I've posted some stuff 10, 12 times. And the only way you know that is to go through, but people don't really see that. So you don't really know if someone sees it the first time, second time. Sometimes it takes other people in your community. Like, I've had, I have opportunities. I've worked with people who I didn't approach them. A fan approached them for me and did all the selling for me, probably in a better way than I could have, because it was their passion. So it's a weird thing of, you kind of just have to carpet bomb it. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, if you are passionate about your game or what you're doing, I don't feel like you have to feel bad about putting it out there. Like, if your game is good, is it spam? You know? Like, is anyone gonna be like, oh, stop showing me this cool, awesome art. Stop showing me this awesome game, please, no. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we filtered out because we're used to thinking that things are bad. And there's something about something being repeatedly shown to people that eventually makes them go, oh, well, maybe it's not so bad. I've seen it the 6th time now. I'll look at it now. And then if you have something good, now they're like, oh, well, why did I ignore this the first 6 times? And now you have a fan, you know?
I think for us, and to kind of like hook into that, absolutely, like, don't stop talking about your stuff, but the way that we've really approached it is through a lot of partnerships. So really trying to identify, like, you know, let's say in the roller derby game, right? Like, all I can think about right now is how can you work with roller derby girls, right? Like, those are the kind of ways that we at least start thinking about who has the audiences that are very similar to ours, or have something that somewhat aligns to some of our values, or even the contents within the game itself. And then we really just start talking. And honestly, if you reach out and just start asking questions to those partners, the worst that they can say to you is no. And you know, I think it's more brilliant when it happens where, you know, there's one yes and someone's like, yeah, this actually does align with the things that we do. And I think having partners also talking about your work in a very different way can also feel really good and authentic, and it feels like you have partners, right? Like, it is now a bigger network of people who not only support you and your game, but you're also doing the same thing for the thing that they're working on too, and that just genuinely feels really good.
For us, we really try to build an identity for our studio. A lot of times studios like to, rightfully so, build up that identity by focusing on one type of game or one type of a narrative or one type of art style. For us, if you look at our portfolio of games, every single one of them is actually quite different from each other technically, but that the idea of creating meaningful games that have certain values or that try to challenge the way you think, that's how we kind of build up our identity as a studio, so that by the 5th year of emailing someone we know at IGN or Kotaku, they know that even though this is a brand new game that they've never heard of, the fact that it has Serenity Forge attached to the name, they already have a kind of assumption about what kind of goal the game would be trying to achieve. And so that's kind of how we manage the fact that we kind of are very genre agnostic.
Kickstarter. Some people hate it, some people love it. Geneva, I know you've had experience with Kickstarter, and Brandon, I know you have experience with Kickstarter. What are the key lessons that you've taken away from your experience?
I guess just doing a lot of prep before the Kickstarter starts so I can get the word out there, and so I don't be like, hey, Kickstarter's up, but I'm saying it the day it's launched, or reaching out to people and being like, hey, do you want to try out my game and things like that. One thing I really wanted to have for the Kickstarter was having a demo ready so that people aren't like, I might give you money, but I don't know if you're going to finish it or something like that. That was my experience, but also I guess what I've also learned is to try to time manage everything better, so that after it's woohoo, we've launched, we've got our money, but now it's now we need to make the thing. Yeah.
I call it the 90-day plan now. Let's assume your Kickstarter's 30 days, which there's the problem with Kickstarter, and also the reason why I love it, is because you can do kind of whatever you want. And sometimes the problem is I think people assume there's only one way to do Kickstarter because X person has done it this way. When I did Welcome to Tycor, which is what I kickstarted, at the time I looked and no one had really ever done a setting and art book. There's no rules in this first book, and I did that on purpose. I wanted you to get the setting, the lore, and I knew that was something that hadn't been done. And when I started looking around and asking about it, people were like, well, no one's gonna buy that. Meh. So you kind of have to realize that Kickstarter is just a funding platform. And so the second question is, whose money do you want, right? And in my case, I was like, I want everybody's money. Honestly, and this is my thinking, is because a lot of the times when someone sees something that's Black focusing or African, they assume it's only for minorities. And I'm like, that's not the point of this. Some of the people who need this the most are not minorities. You need to understand what that looks like, feel it. So I knew from the get-go I didn't want to pigeonhole my audience. I wanted everybody to have it. I wanted kids to have it. I wanted adults to have it. And it was up to me whether or not I was capable of that. So the 90-day plan, so it was 30 days before the Kickstarter, I started talking about it. I made a huge big deal about it. I had a whole countdown, and it was basically every day down till the Kickstarter started. And at that time, I had no followers. I was on Twitter, I had 100 people. So I was shouting to myself. So I just was persistent about it so that people would start noticing it. And then when the Kickstarter came out, I do, I have one right now. I do updates pretty much every day. I shout out about it. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, name it. I'm probably on it, Pinterest. I don't maintain it, but a Kickstarter is just trying to get people onto an idea. So I told them, hey, this idea is awesome, and if you don't fund this, it won't happen. And that sort of panic got to people, and I made my goal low, because you can apply game strategy to Kickstarter. Not to make it sound like a tool, because it is a tool, but people look at it in different ways, So they look at it and they see how much is it to fund, and they think, okay, will you hit it? Do I want to be a part of that? So I made my first one fairly low because I didn't have any, it wasn't a game, a physical game. I didn't have to worry about graphics. It was just me writing, and I needed an artist. I needed art. So I'm like, hey, 4K, I already have most of it written. I want some cool art, low goal. And I was lucky enough to have an artist who no one had ever heard of, and he's really good. And in my opinion, in 5 years, you're gonna see him doing Marvel comics as far as I'm concerned. He's that good. And people were like, wow, that's awesome. And we funded the first day, the first hour. And that matters a big deal, because things like that, they're all about momentum. So if Kickstarter sees that you're doing well, it starts putting you in front of other people to make you do better. So that's why some people have a hard time funding, because if you're aiming low, Kickstarter just goes, meh, and they won't put you up on popularity, they won't put you on magic, none of that. No one will see you unless you tell them to. So like hitting it fast, hitting it hard, getting it going. I could have a whole talk about it, because it's a hard game, but it's because you can do it for everything. CDs, music. I'm doing a graphic novel right now. We're at like 92% with like 8 days ago. You know, so it's like you can do kind of whatever you want to as long as you have a good plan and you tell people. Like I'm never scared to tell people about Swords Fall. Like if you want to talk about Swords Fall, how much time you got? You know, so same thing in your Kickstarter page. A lot of people will think that people don't want to read stuff, which is not false, but they'd rather see it's there and not read it than not have it and read it. So my original Kickstarter page is probably like three pages long. It's got tons of stuff. Most people don't read it, but they see it and they go, oh, he's serious. Like, here's some money. And, you know.
Did you really put Swords Fall on Pinterest?
Yeah. I'm dead serious. Google me. Like, there's pretty much not a social, like,
That's so
other than,
impressive.
like, Gab, because that's pretty much the only one I'm not on.
Wow.
And I might do it just to mess with them.
I love it.
Wow, I thought the Pinterest thing was just a joke. All right.
I did too.
So,
Like,
so
Love it.
Well, like, not to derail, but different social media has different audiences. And if you only do one, you are literally missing out on a demographic. People go to Pinterest for the pictures, right? So when I was doing Swords Fall and I needed art and I needed to find artists, that's how I found my artists. I went to Pinterest and I was like, black fantasy art. And I looked for fantasy art, and it's Pinterest is the best image searching engine on the internet. Better than Google Images, anything. If you need a picture, go to Pinterest. So therefore, when people are looking for stuff and art, I just tag the crap out of it. So you look at fantasy and black, you'll find something related to Swordsfall, and it's a small thing. It's like the smallest amount of my network. I'm like 80% Twitter, but I'll take the 2%.
So speaking of social media, like, it's been a big help for you, but can it also be a hindrance?
Probably. I'm not the best person to ask because I say a lot of things on Twitter that most people would not. And I get a lot of credit for it, or I'm surprised and I'm like, I thought that was the one people were going to be mad about.
Would you care to elaborate on these tweets?
Well, like, I'm definitely like a mini activist. Like, if you look at Black Lives Matter stuff, I've been there. I'm that guy. You know, like, that's why I did Swordsfall. It wasn't just because I wanted to do a game just because. I wanted to do a game, but I also wanted to get black faces specifically at the tabletop, you know. So if I see someone saying crazy stuff on Twitter about racist, I retweet them and I tell them how stupid I think they are. And I know that's something that people don't normally like to do or see, but me personally, I think we're in the kind of time where we have to admit that the big companies are the ones we look to the most. When we think about certain things when it comes to images, it's from movies, it's from TV, it's from books. Like, the creators are the ones who are creating that look that people have. So I feel like that's important to not just create your own good stuff, but if you're a creator and you have a powerful voice and someone is doing something harmful in your community, you should step up. And that's what I do on Twitter. And I know that I think people are always expecting, like, they assume that you can't necessarily be yourself on social media, and I think that's the problem. You should be yourself on social media because we know when people are being fake. And when people are being fake, we don't like them, we don't want to give their money, and that's why we talk about corporations the way we do. So you can be fallible, you just have to be willing to either walk away when you're in too deep and be like, all right, away from the Twitter, or just being able to apologize. Like, that's something that people can do. Like, every once in a while, I mean, I'll step in it and I go, oh, my bad, I'm sorry. And that's it. But you should be yourself. You should be as open as you can on social media because we know what that looks like.
Thoughts on social media? Anyone else?
Didn't mean to take it over. I do it a lot.
I think on a personal note, not as Glitch, but like on a personal note with social media, I personally have kind of like a hard time with it because I want to be active online, but I also want to be present here. So like I have this kind of back and forth of like, okay, well, how much of my mental capacity and my space is online versus what I have in person and how present I am in conversations. I know it's like a weird thing that I think just I struggle with because I feel it when I'm on Twitter more than I usually am or whatnot, I start just thinking about the online interactions a lot more, and I see myself distracted in my everyday conversations. So I think that's like again a personal thing, and I think it sometimes distracts me from my real life relationships, which is why we have a social media manager.
There you go. So Ava, Glitch is all about finding bold new voices. Can you define what that means for you?
I think the best way to define it right now, at the very least, is just looking at the projects that we have supported and the projects that we have funded. For example, Hyperdot is just outside the door. It's an action arcade game with one rule: dodge everything. And what makes that game special for me is, one, like Charles and I have been friends for like 8 years when he was 16. But two, Charles is Minnesota's first Black game developer who owns and runs his own company in history. So like, we are making history together, and that's so exciting. And I think the other component is just his overall game design philosophy. The two big things about the game are that he really wanted to make something that was super challenging, but incredibly flexible. On the flexibility side of it all, it's kind of manifested itself into the fact that you can play Hyperdot on 7 different controllers. So you can play it with touch, tilt, stylus. You can also play it with eye tracking, in addition to the Xbox Adaptive Controller with all of its peripherals. And I think those are the things that, you know, make it intriguing, make it interesting, and really it's all about Charles and his vision. And I'm really just there to figure out how to best support him. And our team is there how to figure out how to best support him and talk about his goals and what he wants to see of the future. And so I think it comes back to like that partnership, that relationship, and those are the types of projects that we get really excited about when we talk to a designer and they have a vision for this project and they see where they want to go with it, but they might just need a little bit of help getting there.
Brandon, Kevin, forgive me. When you're looking to fund a game, what does it have to secure funding from your company?
Yeah, so one thing I guess I forgot to mention is that not only are we a developer, but we're a publisher as well. Because of that kind of unique kind of structure that we have, a lot of times not only do we publish games, not only do we fund them, but we also support the game from a development side in whatever way, whatever bespoke way that it works out best for both partners. So, for example, for certain games, we offer porting services. If they're only making it for PC, or if their original plan was only to release it on PC, and they haven't even thought about consoles because they just didn't think that any publisher would be able to offer porting services. We would come in and offer to port the game to Switch or PS4 or Xbox for them. And in other circumstances, we would actually be significantly more involved, and we would actually act as essentially co-developers. Again, kind of talking to our partners truly as partners in a way that where we can figure out like what's the best way for us to be involved. One example is that for a game called Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. Yeah, it's a really long name. We essentially became co-developers, even though originally we were going to help with just some art. We ended up being able to help with so much of the art that essentially we were making half the game. For another game that's coming out later this year called Once Upon a Coma, we basically kind of flipped and did the opposite, where our partner is doing pretty much all the art and we're doing all the coding. So that's kind of the unique circumstance that we see ourselves as a publisher. Is not only do we want to, of course, look for games that seem meaningful, games that seem to kind of tell some kind of interesting value-driven message. But we also see opportunities where we can kind of come in and maybe help them more as a co-developer, if they want. We're not obviously gonna push ourselves and like force the developers to take help that they don't want. But that's kind of how we do it.
Ava, if you like to weigh in, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Original question?
Yes.
Wait, what was the original question?
The original question was, how do you determine who you give funding to? What does that game have to make you like, okay, I'm going to put financial resources and whatever else behind it to make it succeed?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to where you were at. It's all just that starting conversation. The way that we see it is a partnership, and we have an arsenal of things that we can help with, such as localization, optimization, porting, insights. It's up to the developer to have a conversation with us and see what fits, what makes sense for them. And that's why I think really it comes down to like the first couple of conversations where we have to have of what are your goals? What do you need for your project? I've heard so many times, I think the part where people fail is like they don't know what they need. And so I really urge folks to really understand, like, in your development cycle, what it is that you really need, and then come talk to us, or even just have open conversations with us and say, like, we're not really looking for a publisher at the moment, but we'd really love to know, like, what are the things that you can do to help us, and here's where we're at in the process. A case study or a sample or an example is, for example, with Optica. It was a mobile-first title that came out on iOS first, then Android, and then PC. When we sat down and talked with the developers about this project, it was very clear that they were really interested specifically in insights and data analytics and player behavior. Myself, Nicholas, and I are the two co-founders of the organization, and we both have background in neuroscience, and Nicholas is primarily data science. And so we just kind of sat down and said, like, okay, well, let's just do a diagnosis and see what on earth is going on, and what is it that you want to learn from this, and why are you interested in insights? And so we figured out pretty quickly that the developers had actually designed two different types of levels. They had designed primarily easy levels and then very challenging levels. But everything in the center was missing. So if you got in, we ended up doing a lot of progression testing. Once we got in, we were like, okay, well, it's really easy at first, and you have a lot of really simple levels, but then there's just a massive drop-off because people can't figure it out. And we noticed it in data pretty quickly when someone was sitting, well, a lot of people were sitting on like level, I think, must have been like level 22 or something of sorts. And Hyperdot is level 27. But in level 22, it was just taking people over 2 hours to figure out a puzzle. So yeah, so we were like, ding, ding. That's where we think that we can help out. This is the problem that they're facing, and then this is what they really wanted help with, and then that's how we moved forward together. So it really just depends on that conversation, and if there's a place that we can come together and find a place where we can help and we can be an assistance. But it starts with the developer kind of having an idea of what they want, or at least open to exploring what it is that they want.
Very cool. So Geneva, you have quite a few games under your belt at this point. I guess my question for you is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in making your games? And going forward, do you see yourself working with a publisher, or do you want to just maintain total artistic control and just keep going on it your own?
Well, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is to like make time for myself so that I can like rest and things like that, because like there's been a big shift from working in games and working on games in high school and then working on games in college, and I've realized I need to let myself rest or else I will not make any games. But thinking about the future, I'm not entirely sure if I want to just keep going solo or find a publisher. I feel like right for now I'm just gonna keep being like solo and working on things, but like as I create more games I might lean towards like giving it a try. It can't be that bad. Yeah.
I've heard it can.
Oh.
Hey, I love that you've talked about self-care. Everybody needs self-care. I don't care what it is. Take some time for you. Love you. And B, I am going to talk to Brandon and Ava. Colorado and Minnesota. When I hear those states, I do not think gaming.
There's nothing else to do in the winter.
All right, okay. But tell me what the gaming community looks like in your respective states, and how many people do you have coming to you? Like, how are you helping to develop it? Like, what was it before and now after you've arrived?
Guess I'll start, yeah. So for Colorado, you know, me and some of our co-founders we knew each other back in high school and during college, and you know, we kind of went through like a very similar phase of like really thinking that we wanted to go into game dev and, you know, wondering if that was an actual viable career choice or not. Well, back then, I think some of us tried to reach out to some local developers, you know, that we found on Game Dev Map, and it didn't seem like there was that much of a community. But once we decided to kind of like make the leap to, you know, wanting to put more time into this, we realized that there actually were a significant amount of just solo independent developers throughout the state. And, you know, as Slack became popular, you know, we tried being a lot more involved in the Colorado game dev Slack community. And, you know, kind of fast forward 5-6 years, not only has the, you know, smaller solo independent community in the Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins area, in Colorado Springs, really not just grown, but also became more vocal and made themselves more aware, more vocal about their existence, you know, on platforms like our state Slack. But also, you know, other, you know, very legitimate studios, you know, have done really well for themselves, such as Deck 9 Games. They did Life is Strange Before the Storm. There's Direwolf Digital that does a lot of digital trading card games. There's Ophonic that did Friday the 13th. And so it's just a community that we, you know, try our best at engaging in, but also try to just encourage people to be more vocal and, like, you know, kind of share, you know, what they're doing and make themselves be more seen, essentially. You know, there's a lot of shy people, you know, as game devs, you know, a lot of them would rather, you know, just be stuck in their basement and, you know, code along all day. But it's something that I think, you know, with a lot of social media these days, but with tools like Slack and Discord as well, you know, I think Slack and Discord in particular allows some of the more shy people out there to be more communicative. So technology, I think, really helped, you know, in the recent years too.
On my end, when I was in college, I was trying my hardest to actually find a community. My parents were very Asian. They wanted me to either be a doctor or a lawyer, and I tried that. Wasn't into it, and I realized, like, okay, I did my undergrad in neuroscience, even though I was like making games in AOL chat rooms when I was younger. They didn't understand that part, so I needed to find a group of people that really understood me and were also interested in the same things. At the University of Minnesota, there weren't any professors who were doing anything at the time. There really wasn't a ton of resources available, and you don't think of Minnesota as a place that has a bunch of studios. People don't think it's a very robust area. So the first thing I started was a student group actually on the U of M campus, which was kind of the initial founding of Glitch when I was 19. Luckily, at the time, we started hosting a couple of events in addition to hosting talks and starting to bring people out from the industry to do talks and workshops. And very quickly, we had like over 3,000 people who had signed up for our newsletter just at the university alone. And so I went to the university and started pitching the idea of like, hey, can we actually make this a formal program? They awarded me $50,000 within the first like 6 months or so to start doing that programming, which you all should do if you're at a university. See if they'll give you funding to do cool shit. Oh wait, can I swear? Sorry.
Yes, yes you can.
But it really for us started there. We didn't know who was really all around us because there wasn't a pre-existing organization. We later found the IGDA, and there were roughly around like, I don't know, 50 or so people that would show up and go to those events monthly, but they were definitely presentations. They weren't like socials or anything of sorts to go hang out with people. It was mostly like come watch presentation. So we just kept doing, at least on a local perspective, we have a really great arts granting, or like we just have a lot of artist grants that are available in Minnesota, actually the top state that has artist grants and funding, ahead of New York City, by the way. But they've been very supportive. Like a lot of those organizations within the past couple of years have been very supportive in funding a lot of activities, like doing more talks and conventions and events. And I think slowly but surely just having those more social gatherings and having on top of the IGDA meetups, and in our office we do a monthly event called Playtest. Roughly around 50 to 100 people show up every single month, and we do free co-working in the office as well. So even though we are a public benefit corporation publisher, we really had nonprofit roots. And so a lot of that community building from even day one, I'd say, started and was supported by a lot of infrastructures that we had in Minnesota to kind of get it to where it is. I think just to give some shout outs to the companies that are there, like Fantasy Flight is there, as well as Asmodee, in addition to a bunch of different indie teams like Leader Games, if folks are familiar with Root, and that's in the tabletop scene, and Vast. I know the team at Space Mace just recently released Joggernauts last year, if you're familiar with that. And I mean, Aubrey was up here earlier. Yeah, Monster Games is also in Minnesota, and Game Informer is also in Minnesota. So there's a lot of momentum, and there's a lot of support, and even our history with having founded and originally built Oregon Trail. It's going to take a little bit more time, and I think also a little bit more funding and more support to really get it to where it could be. But it's really exciting and really interesting in terms of the ecosystem right now. And of course, Slack also helps. I think we have like 600 or so people in the MSP Game Dev Slack. So,
because I think with states like Colorado and Minnesota, there's a big problem with fragmentation. What little community may build themselves up in one corner of the state, because they're physically so separated from maybe the larger towns or cities in the state. Traditionally it's just harder to form a single larger community, and so technology obviously really helps. But to your point too, like local actual face-to-face meetups are just as important, if not more, because you still want to actually see that these people you've been talking online with for the past many months or years are actual human beings that you can go grab a bite or go grab a drink with.
And we've noticed at least there are more games that are being shipped every single year now, which is really exciting, and I think a way that we can really measure very quickly and easily, like how many games are coming out this year, how many games are being shipped by companies here in Minnesota, and that's really exciting to see, like that growth in terms of numbers, people, and engagement online, the amount of events that are happening, and also the number of games that are shipping. That I think, honestly, someone could do a whole paper on their own region, and we've been trying to work with the Knight Foundation to get them to fund that. But like being able to actually measure a lot of those things can show true, real growth. Yeah.
So, as a creative person, I struggle with this because I have things I'm trying to work on. You've made the game, you've got the art, everything's rolling. When are you supposed to have the business plan? When? Like it's fine to make the creative thing, but to actually get it out there and make your money and be responsible for when is that supposed to happen?
At the beginning.
I would say at the beginning as well, and I'm betting that most people would be like, no, but yeah, at the beginning.
That's the most ideal scenario for sure. Is that like your business strategy and your creative passion just magically happen to align, and when that does happen, it's obviously amazing. Unfortunately, it's not something that always, instantaneously, organically happens. It's something that our team, and I'm sure people here too, have found that it's something that you have to kind of just be aware of and kind of not like, I want to say like massage into, like as you're developing the plan, if that makes sense.
They go together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think that designing a game and designing a business is so similar.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, and I actually use both of those skills all the damn time. And I actually think that people should use them more, especially on the business side. Like with folks who are, from marginalized communities, I hope that, even us all saying like at the beginning here is going to make an impact, just because I really want people to be thinking about, yes, this is a creative endeavor, but this is also my time. And my time is worth something. I really think that with a business model and also with your creative works, like if it's something that you want to do full time, figure out how, you can make those two align so that you can keep doing what you're doing for longer, and also still have that creative freedom to make what you want while, figuring out if there's an audience for it. I think there's a really powerful way to really be thinking about that when you're building something new.
I would say, I think one of the problems is we tend to think of business as like the nasty side, and everybody thinks it's creative as the nice side. And I do like some mini kickstarting coaching on the side, and the first thing I tell people is, and it's a little bit mean, and it's supposed to be, but it's like anybody can create anything, but not everybody has money, and that's the real of it. And if you don't remember that at the beginning, you could put all your forces into something that from the get-go was never going to actually sell because of some reason that you needed to do at the beginning. So if you are creative and you want to put something out there, you have to think of the business, because how are you going to pay your bills, feed your peeps? So you don't have to separate the two. Like it can really be as simple as, if I make this thing, who's going to buy it? Not like people, but like who's gonna buy it? Like we have those demographics for a reason, because people in their 20s spend differently than people in their 40s, and you can't get around that. So the question is, which one does your game apply to? And if it applies to one, how can you make it apply to the other? And you can do that creatively. It doesn't have to be, some NBA guy. It can be as simple as, oh, well, older people typically respect their time more, so if I'm doing a game, I should have some sort of quick start rules or things on the screen, things like that. It's more of a market. Like people are willing to spend money if it's something they like. The question is, how can you show them that they're going to like your stuff? And it doesn't have to be a business thing. It's just it's a natural thing. It's like if you, because I'm a tabletop guy, so I always think, how can we get our friends at the table? Because the thing that happens, anybody who I know plays tabletop games, you can find a game you like and have fun trying to get your friends into it. So there's definitely something to say that just because it's in a market doesn't mean it's for everybody. And you have to think that about that at the beginning.
I think, and like you said earlier regarding Kickstarter, if you can put yourself into the proper mindset of treating the business strategy itself as design, as game design, as a form of game design, basically, like, you're just gonna have a lot more fun with it too. Like, cause now it's integrated into your creative vision. It's not the evil necessary thing that you're forced to do. Like, it's part of your vision now.
Yeah, and to add to that too, knowing what your business model is, understanding who your audience is, gives you, in my opinion, more creative power to take more risks. I think those things are really, really important. And honestly, like, whether you choose to continue to go independently or work with a publisher or whatever that is, like, having that understanding of business sense gives you more power when you enter into negotiations at that table. So, like, do the damn thing. Like, I think it's so important. Please think about your business model. Please figure out, like, what your audience is like. What game mechanics do they potentially even like? What is this thing that maybe I've always wanted that other people may want, and test it out and see if it works?
Plus, it's a form of self-care. Like, I don't think a lot of creatives realize how much of your nervous energy is from because you're thinking about whether or not you're going to make money. So having a business plan to feel like you're secure, it really helps. Like, I can honestly say that the Kickstarter for Swords Fall makes me be able to write freely because I don't have to worry about that part. So I can just sit down and write and be like, cool, we're making up some stuff today because it's Tuesday.
Yeah. And also, don't be afraid to share your stuff. I think that's something that I'm also really guilty of too, is like, these are my things. I'm nervous to share it with the world. I will be judged. Please don't judge me. But just sharing incrementally, I think, can really help you hone what your audience is too, and help people find your things. So all of this business and all of the understanding your audience and your market, I hope that it's not as scary as it really sounds, and it really should be integrated with your game. And you can make those really small steps, such as just like sharing your things a little bit more often, or talking to someone like up here that has gone through it before, so that they don't think so that they can help you understand that it's not so scary.
Speaking of talking to people up here, that actually concludes our panel because Sean is giving me the look. And so if you have any further question for any of our panelists, please, please, please feel free to speak to them after this. And with that, this concludes Planning for the Win. And please stay tuned to our other panels. They are going to be just as interesting.
Thank you.